Hello, and welcome back to A Real Horror Show. For over 20 years, the company NECA have brought us the very best when it comes to horror figure collecting. From the cult classics figure line of the 2000s, to the ultimate and retro cloth figures of today, and everything in between. However, over the years, there's been a number of releases that have never seen the light of day, whether they never made it past the prototype stage, or were pulled at the very last minute. If you're new to this channel and you love all things horror, please consider slashing that subscribe button, and don't forget to leave a like on this video and a comment down below as it helps me out greatly. Now, without further ado, join me as we take the dive into the what could have been in the world of horror figure collecting. So we're going to start things off with a few NECA Cult Classic figures to begin with. And for those who don't know, NECA Cult Classics was an action figure line that ran from 2004 up until around 2010. The figure line comprised of clamshell package figures, 12-inch scale figures, quarter scale figures, and box sets of cult movie characters and horror icons. These figures were essentially the ultimate figures of the day, as they came with a variety of accessories. And most of them even came with diorama display bases, which I beg for NECA to bring back, as this really made these figures look incredible to display. Most horror collectors look back very fondly on the Cult Classics line, me included, and people still collect these figures to this day, despite their age and the fact that some of them don't exactly compare with the quality of newer releases. But even with that said, I think that some of these figures are NECA's best work to date. I'm thinking of releases like the Night He Came Home box set and the Exorcist box set as prime examples. But of course, not all the releases for this figure line made the cut, and this included a figure of the character Roger from George A. Romero's groundbreaking 1978 zombie classic Dawn of the Dead. During NECA's Cult Classic years, the company released a total of 3 zombie figures from the Romero masterpiece, including the zombified Steven, more commonly known as Flyboy in Series 3, who is arguably one of the most iconic zombies of all time, the checkered shirt zombie in Series 4, who is actually the zombie featured on the film's iconic poster, and the 𝙆𝙊𝙬𝙎 zombie in Series 6. But one character that never made it to production was the zombified Roger. The only photo I can find of this planned release is from this unproduced horrors article from the November 2014 issue of Horror Hound magazine that features a fully painted prototype of the figure. The article tells us that Roger would have featured articulation in the arms and the head, and would have come with a snap-on blanket to recreate his final moments from the movie. Due to the size of the bed diorama that was planned to accompany the figure, I wonder if NECA was planning to release him in a box set, much like what they did with The Exorcist. Zombie Roger would have been an exceptionally cool release, but unfortunately, this guy never saw the light of day, as at the time, NECA was bringing the Cult Classics line to an end. But the character of Roger will forever have one of the greatest lines ever uttered in cinema.
We got this, man. We got this by the ass.
It's just like Shakespeare. Now, the next figure is probably the most well-known horror collectible that was never released. Well, kind of never released. Not long after the release of Edgar Wright's 2004 zombie comedy, Shaun of the Dead, which is absolutely one of my favourite movies ever made, with one of the greatest screenplays ever written, it's not up for debate. NECA was quick to producing figures for this movie, starting off with a 12-inch talking figure of Shaun, which came out the same year of the film's release in 2004. Oh yeah, happy 20th anniversary Shaun of the Dead. And this actually predated the first series of cult classic figures in 2005. They also released a Shaun figure in Cult Classic Series 4, and finally the Winchester 2-pack featuring both Shaun and his buddy Ed that came out in 2007. And that same year, NECA decided to give Ed his own release in the Hall of Fame Series 2. As we can see, Ed would be coming with various shackles for his hands and ankles, a video game controller, and this little gnome fella holding a fishing rod. And if you actually own any figures from Hall of Fame Series 2, you can actually see Zombie Ed advertised on the back of the packaging. But as the other figures in this wave started to hit store shelves, Zombie Ed was nowhere to be found. And now this is where things start to get really interesting. It's not fully known exactly why Zombie Ed never made his way into the stores, and there's some speculation involved with this, but with the information that I could find online, it was either a case of the production factory shutting down, or the molds for Zombie Ed were actually stolen. The latter of which I imagine is the truth, as somehow, some way, a company in China came into possession of the molds for Zombie Ed, and have been churning out bootlegs of this guy ever since that sell for, quite frankly, ridiculous prices on eBay. You've got to remember, these are not official NECA products, and as you can tell by looking at them, the quality certainly reflects that. You'll usually find that the paintwork is horrible, which becomes very clear when you compare it to the images of the official prototype. Seriously, what in the wish.com is this? Look, all I'm saying is, this year is the 20th anniversary of Shaun of the Dead, and this would be the perfect time for an ultimate 2-pack of both Shaun and Ed, with a boatload of accessories, as well as interchangeable body parts that can be switched out to have normal Ed and zombified Ed. I'm just throwing the idea out there.
How's that for a slice of fried gold?
Yeah, boy!
Another unreleased figure that was planned to come out as a cult classic box set release was that of Samara Morgan from The Ring. Based on the 2002 American remake of the 1998 J-horror movie Ring, this impressive box set would have allowed collectors to recreate one of the most iconic scenes from the film, where Samara emerges from the well and proceeds to crawl out of the television set. Although this figure was never produced due to licensing rights, we have these images of both the fully completed prototype of the figure and the concept art for the entire set, and all I can say is, what an absolute travesty that this set never saw the light of day. The set was planned to come with 2 display bases, one being the iconic well as seen in the cursed videotape, and the other being a full diorama television set, complete with shelving and VHS tapes. The Samara figure herself would have divided at the waist, so you could display her as a full figure standing in front of the well, or display her as she emerges from the television screen. She would have also had 2 head sculpts, one with flexible hair that covers the entire head, and another with her hair slightly parted, revealing her deadly glare. The concept art also shows us that Samara would have had articulation in her shoulders, wrists and elbows, which would have been a very ambitious thing for NECA figures back in 2005. I'd go as far as saying that the imagery of this character emerging from the well and crawling up the television set has become some of the most iconic images in horror at this point. And I hope that one day NECA returns to this concept and releases Samara in all of her glory, as we truly missed out on an incredible release with this. The character of Samara, or 𝙎𝙬𝙎𝙎 in the original Japanese film, is one that has definitely not been represented enough when it comes to the world of horror collectibles. The company SH Figure Arts released their own figure of 𝙎𝙬𝙎 around 10 years ago, and although it's cool that the character finally got a figure release, it definitely doesn't look as good as what NECA was planning to produce, and it's also extremely expensive now. Since 2025 marks the 20th anniversary of the Cult Classics line, I think NECA should finally release all of these figures as Cult Classics Series 8. Now you can't tell me that's not $1 billion idea right there. These next figures I find kinda hard to talk about, as the pain from their cancellation, it still hurts.
That's a rather tender subject.
But back in 2010, NECA announced that they'd be releasing a couple of figures to celebrate the 35th anniversary of the greatest cult classic movie of all time, the Rocky Horror Picture Show. The announcement came along with images of 2 finished prototype figures of Riff Raff, as portrayed by Richard O'Brien, and the sweet transvestite from transsexual Transylvania himself, Dr. Frankenfurter, as portrayed by the national treasure that is the great Tim Curry. The Rocky Horror Picture Show is one of my all-time favourite movies, so the fact that these guys were cancelled still eats away at me to this day. Despite the seemingly lack of articulation with these figures, I've got to say that the sculpting and paintwork here is absolutely spectacular. And since these guys were planned to be released in 2010 and come in clamshell packaging, I imagine that they would have been released in a similar fashion to the Freddy Krueger action figure line that started around that time. Even though it seems like NECA had these guys practically finished and ready to go, unfortunately the likeness rights of both Richard O'Brien and Tim Curry couldn't be secured, so the figures didn't go any further than the prototype stage, and now all we have are these images to think about what could have been.
Don't be upset.
Well, I am. So for now, all we have are the Vital Toys Rocky Horror figures that were released back in the year 2000. However, since 2010, NECA have released multiple figures of Tim Curry's Pennywise from the 1990 miniseries version of Stephen King's It, proving that the company can obtain Tim Curry's likeness. So, who knows? Maybe NECA will return to the Rocky Horror license in the future, and we'll finally see justice for these amazing lost collectibles. Next year actually marks the 50th anniversary of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, so it would be a perfect time to do so. So the penultimate NECA collectible we'll be taking a look at today is one that was actually available for pre-order before it was cancelled back in 2017. And unlike the other figures on this list, this was actually a prop replica. To be exact, it was this replica of the Freddy Krueger marionette as seen in A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3 Dream Warriors, and was planned to be released in celebration of the movie's 30th anniversary. And Nightmare Part 3 is probably my favourite entry into the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise besides the original movie. And I was so excited when NECA announced this, I couldn't wait to get hold of him. But unfortunately, for one reason or another, the Freddy puppet never made his way to store shelves. As I said, the Freddy Marionette was available for pre-order on many toy websites, so he clearly made his way to the final steps of production before being axed. This extremely detailed replica would have stood at 18 inches tall, and with the help of a wire armature, he would have been fully posable. Additionally, the Freddy puppet's head and hands were casted from the original screen-used molds, and he would have even come with a display stand. This guy would have made for such a perfect display piece in any horror or Freddy Krueger collection, and I think it's a massive shame that he was never released.
Who in the fuck what you think?
From what I can find online, the box art would have also featured some beautiful artwork done by the extremely talented Jason Edmiston. I really hope that NECA releases this guy in the future, but for now, he's another collectible that only exists in the dreams of Freddy fans, or their nightmares. So the last figure on this list is one that was planned to be released not that long ago in the year 2020, as if 2020 wasn't already enough of a dog shit year. But much like the Freddy Marionette, the retro cloth figure of Martin Brody from the 1975 Spielberg classic Jaws was cancelled at the very last hurdle due to a licensing conflict. According to some online, the estate of the late actor Roy Scheider blocked the figure's release at the very last minute, but I don't know the full story with that. The figure himself looked spectacular in both his sculpting and the tailoring, and in classic NECA fashion, the figure would have come with a plethora of accessories, including a pair of glasses, binoculars, a pistol, the radio from the Orca, the chum bucket from one of the film's most iconic scenes, and lastly, the scuba tank that is ultimately used to kill the shark.
Smile, you son of a...
Oh yeah, speaking of the shark, around the time that NECA announced that Jaws figures were on the way, they also revealed plans of releasing a figure of Bruce the Shark to go along with them. And due to the shark being in scale with the figures, he was going to be enormous. You're gonna need a bigger shelf. And he would have made for one hell of a display. But alas, ever since NECA released this photo of the prototype back in June 2020, there has been no word or updates whatsoever of the shark. So I guess that's a bonus unreleased figure for you all. My only assumption is after the cancellation of Brody, NECA put Bruce on the back burner and he's been there ever since. But regardless of Brody's cancellation, NECA still released figures of Quint and Hooper from the movie, and these guys are absolutely incredible. A genuine testament to how amazing the retro cloth line is. It's just a massive shame that this classic trio is left incomplete, and honestly, that's definitely the most annoying factor about the Brody figure, from both a collector's standpoint and as a Jaws fan. And even though it's looking pretty bleak for Bruce, I still hope that down the line, NECA decide to release the shark. And with that, we've reached the end of today's video. I seriously hope you guys have enjoyed this deep dive into the what could have been in horror collecting. Don't forget to leave a like on this video and let me know in a comment down below which unreleased figure do you wish made its way to your collection. Slash that subscribe button if you haven't already, and until next time guys, take care.